But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Thea Stein from Nuffield Trust to speak to developing a blueprint for a successful workforce strategy. Over to you, please, Thea.
By taking control.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Right, great, fantastic. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know, the Nuffield Trust is a health and social care think tank that works on issues to do with policy and does original research. I don't run the hospitals and I don't run the Nuffield gyms. Great sadness to everybody, but I don't do either of those things, but we do lots of thinking. And this is a bit of thinking that we did actually because we were prompted by Steph and her predecessor, Crystal, to actually look in detail at some of the statistics around district nursing. So I'm going to present quite a lot of statistics, but I don't think you'll find them boring because they're really startling. So we know what the case is for district nursing. It's universal, it's actually low cost, but district nursing services have been eroded. In 2016-17, there were 32.5 million district nursing contacts compared to 23.6 million contacts in 2023-24. So I don't need to tell anybody on this call, I've glanced at the people who are here, and we all know the demographics of what's happening in the country. We've got rising demand, and yet we seem to have fewer contacts. Now, one of the challenges that we found, and we did a sort of international piece of work looking at where the evidence is there tends to be not enough data and not enough monitoring, picks up what Steph's been saying, and also not enough research, actually. However, we can find, nevertheless, a whole range of positive and favourable outcomes around things that you know instinctively, but sometimes you have to show the evidence, whether it's from quality of life, whether it's about falls, activities of daily living, etc. When you start looking at the data, of course, some of the data doesn't make sense at all. What you can see is there's a huge difference in contact rates between the most and the least deprived parts of the population. What I should say is, I should have said it right at the beginning, but I forgot. This data will all be published. It'll be published in about 10 days. So then it will all be available, but currently you are seeing all this data in advance of publication. So you will be able to share it, but these slides won't be shared straight after this meeting, okay? But you will then have the data, which I'm hoping is going to be very useful for you going forward. This just summarises some of the places in the world that you can find the evidence base for some of the community nursing interventions from everywhere, from Japan, Australia, Canada, etc., really showing the way in which district nurses make an impact. But this is the thing that really matters. It's really the figure if you go away with, for every 5 district nurses there were in 2009, there are now 3. There are fewer. You don't really have to be an expert workforce planner to work out that with an aging population that has multiple long-term conditions, where a high proportion of those people will at some stage be in their houses, in their homes, unable to get out, that it is at the very least strange that you have fewer district nurses, one of the most qualified professionals to work with this group. In the same period, adult nursing in hospitals gone up by 43%. So we know where the money's gone. The money's gone into hospitals, and community nursing, which includes children, but I've taken those out of this, has been flatlining. We then can see that we have the number of district nurses relative to population need. What can we see from that? From what we can see from that is that doesn't really necessarily make sense. There isn't really good workforce planning. There isn't really good consideration of the number of district nurses you really need with population need. And what we also see is that the number of district nurses who are qualified aren't necessarily also working in the community. And that goes back to what we know from what Steph was saying about wanting to often get a higher qualification, getting a higher banding, needing to take your qualifications somewhere else in order to get the reward that you feel you need for what you're doing. We know that happens, and we can see that happening in the trend in the number of nurses with the qualification actually working in the community. We've got a leaky pipeline, which is the way people talk about it, that we've got one registered qualified per 3.5 planned nationally funded places. We've got UK graduates who are likely to have the proper qualifications, not necessarily being in those posts. We've got people not retaining their district nursing qualification. We've got a whole range of things going on, which means that we don't have the workforce. I've said on several public platforms relatively recently, you aren't going to build hospitals at home or anything fancy or anything exciting or anything left shift or all the wonderful ideas that people have if you don't get some of the basics right. And one of the big basics is you do not have a district nursing workforce which will deliver an awful lot of the care you need. So this is just annual joiner and leaver. This will be available. What Steph has just been talking about, workforce pay and progression. And what we've done here is the green band shows the proportion who are band 6 and above, and the purple, those who are at band 5. What you can see is, for example, the Southwest, maybe people on the call from the Southwest, have more of the proportion of their district nurses at band 5. Northeastern Yorkshire excels at having a larger proportion, which I personally always put down to the fact that Steph was in Yorkshire and marched around telling everybody that that's what they should do, and so people did what she told them to do. But however, I have no evidence to prove that, except this chart, which demonstrates that she clearly did have some impact as she told people what to do. But what you can see is there's really significant difference in terms of understanding what Steph was saying, which is these are jobs that should be remunerated at band 7 or above. You have a huge difference about what's going on. What we know here is that people want to talk about productivity, and we know quite a lot about what can make people more productive. There can be technology that can make people more attractive. Definitely work around admin, making sure that way in which district nurses are supported so that they're better managed by support staff. They don't spend too much of their time doing all the admin, and really understanding travel patterns and travel routing, scheduling tools, a whole range of things. There's lots of things you can do looking at workload. You've got to really understand what we often talk about taskification. District nurses are trained to work holistically. They're trained to work comprehensively, to walk up the garden path and to see and look at everything around them. And from that moment on, to work in a really comprehensive way. The English Health Service, more than many other health services in the whole of Europe, have taken an approach which is task focused and not holistic focused. I have a personal view about this, which is that we really need to move for all of our clinicians to have a far more holistic approach, which is how they were trained rather than a task-based approach. I fear that the future is a bit bedded to the idea that you can take a task and give it to somebody to do as a way of becoming more productive, rather than an integrated holistic approach to the way of becoming more productive. It just talks again about variation in unit costs, which is something, if you're going to try and present this information at a local level, this data looks at 72 trusts at the unit cost of a face-to-face contact with a district nurse across the last 8 years. What you can see is it's just incredibly differential. And this again is a different way of looking at the reported variation in unit costs of the efficiency of district nursing services in different parts of the country. We can see this variation. What we don't know is what this variation means. We don't know how it's been counted, but this way of understanding your own service may be a way, again, of trying to represent what's going on in your service as you're talking to others. So there's a lot of information in there. As I said, that information isn't currently available for you to share straight after this meeting, but I do hope that the information that's there will be helpful to you in the future to look at how you present some of the information in the case. If nothing else, I would take away from what I've said, the number of for every 5 district nurses who were in the service in 2009, there are now 3. just want to remember one thing, and that can't be right. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Thea. A few comments coming through in the chat. Claire's just mentioned it's so uplifting to hear people talk about district nursing who understand what the issues are, which is a lovely reflection from Claire. There was a question, Thea, from Hattie, just wondering about the data around district nurses going down, and is that looking just at the district nurses or looking at the wider DN team, and what are we seeing, because they're being encouraged to make use of support workers and nursing associates. So I don't know if you had any comments you wanted to make on that. I know we've got a bit of information about that in our slides later as well.
Well, if you want to pick it up, but certainly the numbers that we're counting are district nurses, but we would know, and I'm sure Alison will pick up and others will as well, that quite often support workers, nursing associates are being brought in, and that isn't necessarily always a bad thing. There are lots of good ways in which support workers, nursing associates, support staff are used in a really creative and useful way with a district nurse. However, I think I am still left with the question of, at a time of growing need, it doesn't seem right that you are seeing a smaller number of district nurses being available in the community. And there doesn't seem to be the evidence to suggest that you can mop all that up with alternative professions. Skill mix is really important and really useful and can be incredibly valuable when done well. We've written a report on skill mix. Other reports are available, which talks about that. So they are replacing, and some will be right and some will absolutely not be.
And there's just another kind of follow-up question. Is that looking at just district nurses with the DNSPQ qualification, or is that looking at wider district nurses?
Oh, I'm sure if Billy, who was the person who did the report, was here, he would immediately know the answer to that. Steph, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, I do. It is just looking at those with the DNSPQ.
Right.
So that, because that's the only person that should really be calling themselves a district nurse.
Thank you. I knew that you would know the answer.
Oh, we do. Oh no, I think it was an accidental hand up rather than, I think, an intent of a thumbs up. One other question that's come through is around, and we maybe could touch on it later actually in the Q&A bit as well, but how does this all fit in with the NHS long-term plan, focusing more on care in the community?
Well, I think I said towards the end, and I have said in a meeting today, in fact, with officials, you can't ice a cake if you don't have it. You know, I couldn't be stronger of my view that we do not have enough district nurses, physiotherapists, OTs, support workers, practice nurses, health visitors, school. People like to do really fancy things and to talk about really complicated redesigns and neighborhoods and stuff. Don't get me wrong, in my career, I've done loads of that and love it. But there are some really core things. You are not going to do more care in the community if you do not have the core staff groups that can deliver it. It's not complicated. And I need to see that commitment in the long-term workforce plan.
Brilliant. There's a few more comments coming through in the chat, but not necessarily questions, but lots of people echoing the sentiments that you're saying, Thea. So do have a read of that once we've handed over to Alison. But I think we are a couple of minutes ahead. So if anyone does have any questions they would like to ask or want to raise a hand and come in with a reflection, more than welcome to. I'll give it a second to see if anyone does. If not, we can move on to Alison's presentation. Oh, Dominic, we will just get you enabled so that you can come in and ask your question or make your comment. Oh, sorry, Joe, I'll find that as well whilst after Dominic's come in. Thanks for the nudge.
Hello, yeah. I'm actually the analyst at CQC, so I'm going to throw in a shameless plug and say that there's a district nursing piece coming out in our state of care report as well next week. One of the issues I do want to echo, I think, from Steph's presentation here, is that data is absolutely a root issue with CHS services, and particularly I think the weakness of CSDS over the years has been a real problem. We took a sample of CSDS referrals to district nursing over 4 years for the piece I'm working on at the moment, and 91% of them didn't have a closure date, which is a bit of a problem because that's the parameter that determines if the referrals are actually open. So I think the historical handling of CSDS is just being a really major issue.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dominic, for coming in with that. And I think, Jo, I think we did cover your question, and we probably will circle back to that in the Q&A and thinking what are the next steps in terms of district nursing as well, especially in regards to the long-term plan. And I'll ask that question probably to all the speakers at the end, if that's okay. So we'll keep that noted down. But thank you to those that are engaging. Please keep doing so. But I will now hand over to Alison Leary to speak to sticky floors and trapdoors, forced to motion in nursing. Over to you, Alison. Thank you. And thank